Hey guys, my name is Camille and I go by Divinity, and today I'll be doing a track breakdown called Unstoppable, which is my latest release with my girl Sythyst, out on Disciple Roundtable. First, we're going to start with one of the most important things, which is sidechain, because you definitely want the kick and the snare to rattle and just punch you in the soul. So I use Shaperbox on my sidechain. So what I do is I have a whole group here, and then I use Shaperbox too, and I use it as the volume automation. So it's going to duck down, and then I have these triggers which will basically show when the sidechain will hit. And as you can see, you can also split between the low and the mid frequency and go ahead and sidechain them separately, which is really cool. And if you want to learn more about sidechaining with Shaperbox, I highly recommend Barely Alive's video on sidechaining. Okay, so then after that, I'm going to start with the sample that basically started it all. So I got inspired by this sample that I found. It's called a spooky lead. So then after that, I went ahead and I just recreated the MIDI, and then I started making different contacts. So it was just a basic dun 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 dun. So I went ahead and I recreated that concept, but I made it a little bit different like this. Okay, and then I went ahead and I just layered a bunch of sounds, for example, like this. A lot of nice ambience, creepy ambience. One going 19 to the right, other one going 19 to the left with a different timbre. So then all together, it sounds like this. Adds that very nice tension, mystery, something's coming, right? What I really loved was actually the vocal processing. So I sampled this from a video game that I found, and she was the main antagonist, she was the queen, everyone basically lived to serve her, and I thought that her monologue was insane, so I was like, this sounds badass, I'm going to sample it. So it sounds like this. I'm going to show you how it sounds without all the plugins, just so you have an idea. I actually use RX8 so I can isolate the vocals, because when I did sample it, it had a lot of, low end buzzing and just music that I didn't want. I just wanted to extract the vocals. So if you want to do that with anything, I highly recommend RX8. Okay, so first I started off with a CLA2A compressor, which is one of my favorites. I mean, it's a classic for vocals. All right, so it sounds like this.
They do not understand.
But here is where the sauce is. Shout out to Modestep from one of his videos, because he put me on the Maserati vocals. So I slapped this on, and it's a killer combo together with the CLA2A and then the Maserati here without it, just so you get an idea how powerful it is. Without it,
they do not understand.
With it,
they do not understand.
Insane. So then after that, I went ahead and I just put a Valhalla room in parallel. I felt like it needed to be wider, but here is another sauce. Thanks to Lutrix, I checked out one of his videos as well, and I found Side Widener, which is an amazing stereo widener, and what I love about it the most is that it doesn't affect the mono signals. And then I just used the NLS mainly just so it doesn't go past 0, put it all together so it sounds like this.
They do not understand.
Then you have that delay filling the space.
They do not know why we wait.
Of course, I did some
they do not
drum loops, for example. I used this one that I found, which I loved. Unfortunately, I don't have all the processing and, how I chop the samples or process them, because I freeze and flattened basically everything. Okay, and then I layered it with this. And more contact, I believe, here. And then I put an impact here. And then, of course, I put a reverse and all the build. But then all together, just so you have an idea on how the drums sound, they sound like this. I thought it was a nice contrast because it's a little bit more trappy as opposed to the intro that's a little bit more dark and mysterious. So I felt that it kind of brings that energy that it needed. And then for the build up, what I did,
I will fight and fight and fight until we win.
I always use a shepherd tone, which sounds like this. It's kind of like an audio illusion where it just sounds like it's constantly going up forever. You can just play that shepherd's tone forever and it'll trick your mind. It'll still sound like it's rising. So I personally love doing that. And then of course I also use one of my favorite things, which is the endless smile. It's just the easiest way to make anything sound like a riser. And I just put it on my whole pre-master here, so it looks like this. I mean, look at this guy, come on. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and go to the drop. So just a quick tip if you want to just highlight a section. So let's go from the drop all the way to the break. You can press Z, press H and W, or you can press Z to kind of find what you like. And that'll go ahead and basically adjust the height, width, and just zoom in and zoom out, which is really cool. You could also press the plus sign and the minus sign. So just little shortcuts to help you and your workflow in Ableton. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the kick. So first off, we're gonna go ahead and, as you see, I use the kick in D sharp, which is the key of the track, which to me is important. And so I use this dynamic spectral mapper and I put it on the kick. It just made it more thumpy. If you have headphones, you can hear that low end come out a little bit more. And it has all these little algorithms you can put. For example, I put pink for pink noise because pink noise usually sounds good layered or in anything. And then the CLA drums, which I actually don't always use, but that's the exciting part of production, is that you can explore different plugins and see what you can do and what sounds good, and you won't get bored because you could just have fun by trying new things. So I tried the CLA drums with the sub bite push in the kick mode. It's called Kick Start Me Up. I mean, pretty self-explanatory. And then after that, I went ahead and I used Spiff, which is also one of my other secret weapons. I boosted it. I put the mix around 79% and I put the trim about 1.8. And I added a little bit more body and took away the unwanted frequencies there. And then not affecting the high end, etc. So I just did that. And so without it, it sounds like this. With it, it sounds like this. Pretty insane. And then since I already did a lot of transient shaping with Spiff and I added that body, I just did a tiny bit, around 18% with the transient, and then I put the speed around 273%. So I just put a little bit more transient, and then I added a saturator. So since it's already on edge, I put it actually -1. Usually with saturator I like to boost the drive, but for this one it was already too crazy, so I put it down -1 dB, and then I mess with the bass frequency width around there, and then I actually put it in 50%, mixed it in. So here's the clap. So you can see I went ahead and I used a rhythm clap, so it sounds like this. I believe this is the one that she sent. So without everything, it's going to sound like this. Nice. I think I'm also putting a little bit of the sends. I already processed it too before I actually dropped it in, but so I used this clap, the rhythm clap, and I went ahead and I used again the dynamic spectral mapper, which I use on all my drums, with the pink noise. Added that, added this Spiff, beefy snare, can't go wrong with that. And then I use this clip, beef it up even more. Then I use this transient shaper. As you can see, I put the speed all the way up, which is important, as well as the attack at around 26%. I love kilohertz, shout out kilohertz. And then drum bus with just a little sprinkle of 7.9% in the drum bus with the drive. Nice. And then I added more Spiff because I felt like it really needed more transient. I did this from scratch, just added body, took away some unwanted frequencies, and then I just put it up around 5 dB on Spiff. I went ahead and I used this plugin, which is free. I highly recommend you get it. Why not? I just boosted the mids here, and then at the end I did, of course, my crazy EQ. So, and then after that, so basically the reason why I boosted the mid here is because I want this to be the main clap. So it's going to be my mono clap. I want it to be right there with the kick, clap, all there kind of shining through, have its own space. So you can see here with the body kick, which is going to be layered with my clap, it's not starting where the clap hits, as well as this layered where it says barely alive clap dude, which is my layer clap. You can see I'm leaving enough space for the transient to hit for the clap alone, so there's nothing else interfering with the clap and everything else is being sidechained. Let's go ahead and go into the bass sounds. So this is basically a resample bass, and mixed with one of my basses, I crossfaded and then I just stretched it. You know, I consolidated, made it into one, and then I messed with the tones and the texture, with the grain size, the flux, everything like that. When you stretch it and you use those warp modes, you get really cool sounds. So you can actually hear it like this. So I thought that was really nice. And something that you'll notice that I do with a lot of my fills is I'll manually pan my fills. So if you have headphones or really nice monitors, you'll be able to hear this panning. So you can see it's going all the way from the right to the left. So you'll hear it now. So as you can see, this says Divinity Pack Bass Talk. So this is how it sounds like. So unfortunately, because I freeze and flattened everything, you're not going to be able to see my MIDI or my patch. But this is actually made from my sample pack. So what I do sometimes, so I don't get lost into sound design, especially, I mean, if you know me, I mainly use Faceplant. I also use, you know, Serum, Operator once in a while, maybe Vital, but Faceplant's my go-to. Shout out Kilohertz again, making awesome plugins. So I separated the session because, as you can see, my CPU was not handling all of that. And then basically I will go ahead and export them. So that is what I did. So that's where you hear a lot of these sounds. This is actually from my sample pack that I made. So then anyways, after that, I went ahead and I did my layers. So I added this as a response layer in the back, which is also from my pack. Which sounded cool. And then this is something, if you are a producer, you understand layers and little things that just entertain the listener. So it's not just like dun dun dun, you know, the more you listen to it, the more you start hearing those little Easter eggs that I put in. So I also added this. Most importantly, I had to make sure that they all had their separate space. So I went ahead and I put this 32 to the left. I put this 122 to the right. You don't see all my processing, but I also messed with the reverbs, delays, stuff like that to kind of put it in its own space. And then I went ahead and I have this layer as well. So then all together with just the bass, sounds like this. That's without the fills, of course. And then the response is also from my pack here. So this is the second main bass, as you heard before. And then I just chopped it up, as you can see here, and I made my own pattern. And then I just added more of those layers because I just felt like I needed layers all the way around because it just sounds nice. Kind of fills up the mix too. So it sounds weird by itself, but in context, it sounds something like this. More sounds that you subtly hear, as well as this sound in the back as well. That sustain layer. So then, same thing, I just had an A and a B section where I had my layers kind of hit here, and then I had different layers hitting the other, on the other one. So I kind of had an A-B section going on. And then for the switch, I actually use some of her sounds here, and I just processed them, and then I consolidated them. My response layer. Together. So this is another sound that she also sent me, and I just dragged and dropped it, and then I just did some chopping, make sure it is nicely in the mix, and I just processed it to make sure it sounds full, make sure the sub and everything is hitting as hard as the first one, and stuff like that. Nothing too crazy. And then I added this response layer again. So more sounds from my pack as those layers, which sounded really nice with her sounds there. And then after that, I went ahead and I did the break. So as you can see here, there's not much going on with the break besides similar things. I added everything else that I had in the intro before, and then I just added this little low end sound here. Kind of add a little bit of bedding for the break there.
They do not understand.
Okay. And so that's basically it. And then the rest, I just had fun, and then I processed, you know, certain aspects a little different. So for example, over here, I went ahead and I just changed the flow. I processed it differently. Something I will say that I really liked, because over here you can kind of see some kind of processing that you normally see. So you have the phaser flanger, meta flanger, snap heap, M frequency MB, kilohertz delay, M comb MB, the clip, the Pro Q3 with the kilohertz stereo widener, and then side widener, as well as the Pro Q3 and M rhythmizer. So that's just an idea of kind of how I process my things on top of what I already processed before, because it was actually a sample for my sample pack, and then I just processed it even more. So I just went ahead and I did the same layer here. And here is where I added a new sound that I made here. You'll hear it now. As well as that sustain layer that you were hearing before. Just a little louder because I already added more sound, so I needed to come out more in the mix. Excuse the CPU, but you basically get the idea. I just messed around. I added more layers. I had my A-B layer sections, and of course I made them different. But here is what I think was super fun, which was the ending vocals. So I went ahead and I used my manipulator here, and then you can see kind of what it's doing here. So it's actually manipulating the vocals towards the end, which I personally love. I thought that was genius and great. And then of course I had my Valhalla room in parallel, and as well as just a limiter there. So yeah, that's basically what I'm doing for the track. So because everything was basically flattened in my other project, I want to quickly show you guys how I sound designed this bass from scratch. So first I started off with a phase plan, and I used this cute evolving wavetable, which is kind of funny because these evolving wavetables are typically used for FMing or movement, but it sounded unique for the carrier bass, so I wanted to go ahead and use that as the main bass. And then I went ahead and I put a distortion in the saturation. Then what really makes it sound cool is when I dance around the wavetable. So as you can see, I have a syncopated LFO. So this is what it sounds like with just the distortion. And with the LFO, it's dancing around the wavetable, so you can see the movement here. I also assigned the gain here as well. And then I am starting to FM. So I went ahead and I added a sawtooth, and then I put the harmonics at 3. You can put it all the way to 70, which is crazy, but I put it at 3. I put it -7 semitones, and I leveled it out at 47%. And then I FM'd the carrier bass, and as you can pretty much see where I'm FMing here. So then I went ahead and I FM'd the FM bass, as you can see on the phase on the second wavetable below. So as you see here, this is the default wavetable, which is basically like Serum's basic shapes. It's mainly on the square wavetable. I put the semitones -12, I put the harmonics at 12, and then I went ahead and FM'd the phase here to the first sawtooth. And like I said, you can basically see what I did here. And then I just went ahead and I glued it together with this distortion that's in foldback, and I used the syncopated LFO on the mix. So you can see it is routed on lane 1. So let's go ahead and see what I'm doing on lane 1. So I started off with a disperser, a delay, and another disperser. Disperser is really great to give you that nice body or laser sound, but it's amazing if you haven't used it. Then you have a filter here that I just assigned to the cutoff, of course, to kind of start sculpting my sound. So you can really hear the sculpting coming with the second filter, so you'll hear it in a second. So here's without it. Here's with the second filter. It's making it nice and unique, as well as adding more body here. I added a resonator, phase distortion, which shout out kilohertz for that. I don't know many other phase distortions, but they did this one very well. Something that's a little side note, what you can do is you can actually make this main bass, assign it to the sideband, and then you can assign this phase distortion to the sideband, so you're affecting this main bass in the sides, and it's insane. So I didn't do that for this project, but I'm just letting you know that it is possible, and kind of just shows you all the insane amount of capabilities that Faceplant is able to do. It's a beast. Then I used this filter, notch filter, for some movement, added a little bit more highs, and then this flanger, I'm only using this LFO. You see it's ramping up, so it's only pretty much going towards the end. I'm using that for movement. And then I have lane 2. I'm going to show you guys what I did. So I have this comb filter, and I'll show you why in a second. I'm going to open this stereo. So you see this comb filter, I learned this from Vincent and Nasco. So they both do this. I thought it was such a cool trick. So you can see the stereo field here. So without it, it looks like that. And this, with both of them on, you can see how it's a little bit more stereo. And then, so after using these comb filters in stereo, I went ahead and I used this comb filter as a normal comb filter, how you would normally use it. And you can see it's only being ramped up in the mix, so it's only being utilized towards the end there, which gives it a nice texture. Tonal delay, resonator, frequency shifter, so it sounds like this. A lot darker, nicer, and then a distortion to just make it fatter and glue it all together. Then I added another disperser on D sharp over here, tuned it to the track, and then I put D sharp but towards the lower end. And then I use this slice EQ, so there's no low end, and you will know why in a second. So this is after everything. This is basically my processing chain. I'm actually making a separate sub here, so it's being routed to the master, so it's not being affected by all of these effects. So you can see I started with a sine wave, I put a distortion in overdrive, added a little harmonics, as well as putting a noise here, but it's only being affected with the movement of the LFO. So as you can see, it's being assigned here in the level at 68%. So without it, there's no sub, and then with it, there's sub. And then I went ahead and I added a little bit of glide there, and then after that, you can see I have my extra processing. So this is just all through Faceplant. I mean, the capabilities are endless. Faceplant is insane, and you can keep going. You can add as much, and then you can do so much on Faceplant. I'm not going to go into it, but it's definitely my favorite. So this is all through Faceplant, okay? So then I went ahead and I added some extra processing. So first I started off with this basic little reverb. It's just Valhalla room with the high cut all the way up, and you can see it's at 6.9%, large room. And then I went ahead and I added this layer that's very subtle. So it'll sound like this. Actually, I could put it more, but that's not how I designed the sound. So in the layer, I just put a frequency shifter, 2 frequency shifters, one on the ring, one on the shift, then an M comb, side cut, and some other things. Then after that, I went ahead and I used this saturation pack, which is literally just a couple of saturators, like this one, the BX saturator, and the tube amp. And then I went ahead and I put the gain -4. Then I put some OTT here, so you can see this one's more, the time is all the way up, and it's only about 30%. And then I use this OTT, but it's a light version with the time around 200% and the amount around 20%. Then I went ahead and I boosted it at 4 dBs because I already put it down 4 dBs. So I'm just boosting back what I basically took off. And then this is something that I like to do. It's my little rack for Trash 2. I use it sometimes. So what I like about Trash 2 is that you can actually use it in multiband and distort and saturate different things. So I don't do anything with the low band, but for the mid bands, I use this mid excitement, and then it's on the saturator mode, and then for the high end, I went ahead and I used the fuzz on smooth. So without it, it sounds like this. With it, very nice. And then I use this M comb, which I love, just for some resonance. Then I went ahead and I used this God mode, which is a beast. I used it more subtle here, but as you can see, I added a little bit more low end, a little bit of air. Then I just used this Pro Q3 with this kilohertz stereo just to see how it is. And also I use this Fletcher-Munson curve, which it's kind of, if you don't know what a Fletcher-Munson curve is, I would highly suggest researching on that, but it's basically contoured to the human ear, so it kind of takes away the bad frequencies that our human hearing just typically doesn't like, and it accentuates the good frequencies. And I just basically use this at about 7%, depending on how harsh or how much I need. I'll go max 20. And then just to tie it all together, I always use my Soothe. It's like my cherry on top, so I don't have any digital harsh frequencies that might not be so nice to your ears. So without all my processing, still very sick, but then with my processing. Alright, divine beings, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned some tips, some tricks, maybe some plugins, and I hope to see you next time. Unstoppable is out now on Disciple Roundtable.